Putin. Good morning. I'm Darrell Gunter, your host for Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter on Seton Hall University's WSOU 5 and heard on many of your favorite podcasts. I'm so pleased to have as our in-studio guest today, Mr. Kevin Hyde, President and co-founder of Layer 8 Security, as our in-studio guest. Kevin, welcome to the program, and thank you for interrupting your day to talk about your leadership style, your company Layer 8 Security, and also that you're a Seton Hall alumnus, which is great. So if you can you share with our audience a little bit about your background and education?
Sure. My parents are from Philadelphia, but I was raised down in South Carolina, and then parts of Virginia. So I went to Old Dominion University for my undergraduate degree, and I'd already had the intention of going into the Marine Corps. Since I was a teenager, I wanted to be a Marine officer. That was my goal. That was my vision. Nothing deterred me. I kept myself clean. I didn't get in any trouble. As physically fit as I could be, as determined as I could be to make that happen, and I did. And then I was so happy to be done with college and school in general. I thought, I'm never gonna go back to school again. I'm done. I'm now in the Marine Corps. Living my dream. But then one of my wiser, older commanding officers said, "You really need to get your master's degree, son. You're going places." And I was like, I don't want that. And so I was later on convinced that would be a good idea. So I looked at a bunch of programs. Seton Hall had a good one that was a limited residency master's degree in strategic communications and leadership. So I was very fortunate to go through that. My cohort was probably 15 other students. We learned a lot from each other. We went through the program in 20 months. I was really, really happy for that time. I later got to guest lecture a couple of times, which was an honor. I did later become, as a result of my cybersecurity career, a professor at another local university closer to Philadelphia, where I live now. And then I've guest lectured at other universities. So the fact that I actually am a professor in some respects is actually laughable to me, because I was the guy who was always like, nah, school, no. I just want to get out and do. I don't want to do school. And then I realized how important the two things are. And so I'm definitely happy where I am now. I live in Valley Forge with my family, wife and two kids, and our dog, and we have a really wonderful life. I thank God every day. We've lived through it. We've been through the crucible, but we have a very good life at this point. And so that's where I'm at now. My career has taken tacks here and there like a sailboat, to get to where I'm at. I'm sure we'll touch on parts of that, but that's the story.
So how did you come about to be a co-founder of Layer 8? And also, what is Layer 8 Security?
Yeah, so I got into cybersecurity the way most do. I got an English degree, right? No, I'm being facetious. I did get my undergraduate degree in English. I was a very good communicator. In the Marine Corps, I was a public affairs officer in my first stint of active duty. So I was a spokesman for the Marine Corps. And after 9/11, that became a very important role. It was never not an important role, but it became a little more crucial because things were happening, kinetic things all over the world, and we needed people to go out and be able to explain it and tell the American people and the rest of the world, here's what's happening. So that became my job for several years. I got out during that time, I got my master's from Seton Hall. I went to back into the civilian world, climbed up my way, and then I got back into the reserves. In the reserves, you cannot be a public affairs officer, so I became an intelligence officer. I dabbled a little bit with the intel community when I was in my public affairs role, but when I got a chance to go into the reserve unit, my good friend Jeff Lipson was the executive officer of that unit at the time, and he said, "Oh, we have a process to get you back in reserves. I can help you with that." So he did, and then we created this pathway for me. I got my commission back. I got appointed into the intelligence community, and I went to schools and training and got over to the NSA and Cyber Command. Jeff was a early founder of Cyber Command. He was a communications officer and an intel guy. He got into Cyber Command early. He brought me in. I called him up after I'd finished one particular school, had extra clearances and all this. And I said, "What do you think I should be doing with these things? Any ideas?" he said, I think you need to come interview for this job that they have at the NSA. So I did, and I got it. And it really propelled my career into a whole nother trajectory. In late 2014, Jeff and I demobilized off active duty. We were both activated for a long period of time. We demobilized while our families were up here in Philadelphia. We were down there in Maryland, where the headquarters is for Cyber Command. We decided we could do this. We had a couple of options to take some government contracts and get started that way. And so we got started in that direction. We quickly learned how much the private sector needed what we had now, this knowledge about how to set up an information security program, how to test it, how to maintain it, how to keep your company protected. And then it also quickly became about cyber compliance, right? So a lot of the reasons why companies get attacked is because of their vendor and third party community. And so that also became crucial. And so we started to learn all these dynamics in real time as the rest of the world was learning them, but we wrapped services around them pretty quickly to be able to help companies deal with it. So we rebranded the company as Layer 8 Security by 2016. We started staffing up one here, one here, one here, one here. And, as we sold more, we staffed more. And, we're about 10, almost 10 years here in the running as Layer 8. And we've gotten ourselves to, hundreds of clients, and, we have a great cadre of employees. We're just under 30 full time. So, and we just won Best Places to Work again, which is always nice. So we're hitting these accolades and whatnot. But the essence of what Layer 8 is really all about, our mission is keeping businesses in business. What that means for us is the name Layer 8 Security is all about the human layer. So there's 7 layers of the OSI networking model. Those who are in IT or technology, you might understand what all those layers are. I won't go into it now. But there's, 7 layers. The 7th is the application layer. Number 1 is the physical layer. The one that sits on top of the 7th layer is the one that always messes it up. It's the most vulnerable. It's the human layer. And so we branded the company as the, human layer of cybersecurity. You have to start with the humans. You cannot just work on it as a technology process. It doesn't work like that. You have to address it as a business problem, not an IT problem. And so when you see our logo, even the 8 and the green arrow on top of that pinwheel, it's heavier. It's the 8th layer. It's the 8th segment on top of that logo. And then in all of our branding and all of our messaging and reporting, we use green a lot. And the green is always referencing back to the human layer. And I want my analysts and consultants, when they're delivering our work to the clients, keeping in mind, you're talking to a person. This is someone who wants to do it right. They care. You have to meet them at their level. Make sure that you're being empathetic. No one got into business to be the most cyber secure financial services company, most cyber secure bank, most cyber secure biotechnology company. They got into it to create what they wanted to do based on what they like. So we have to be empathetic to that, put the human first in everything that we do. And that's sort of how we became Layer 8. That's how we've gone to market.
I have to admit, it is the most beautiful logo that I've seen in a long time. And the way that you have described it, it really describes the essence of what Layer 8 does. So congratulations on that. That is awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So, as a veteran-owned business, how have your military values influenced your leadership approach?
Well, our, we have it everywhere too. I mean, we didn't start out with the company by saying, okay, it's 2 of us in one little tiny office, which is how we got our start. Here's the values we're going to have. We didn't really do it like that. We came from the Marine Corps, honor, courage, commitment. Everyone knows the values. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, our motto. So we didn't start out like that. It was more of an observation. Here's what I'm noticing. We would recruit people that we would hope would operate like we would to work within our ranks. So we would want people who are not afraid to go above and beyond, who will by default find a way to get it done creatively, efficiently. I want when my employees come and say, well, they want this thing, but it might take me an extra 3 or 4 hours, and the contract is only this many hours. And I'd say, go take care of the client. If it comes to money, I'll worry about the money. You do what you need to take care of the client. Come back and tell me how it went. So I've always empowered our teammates to operate like that. I don't want them worrying about. Yes, they should care about the contract and statement of work in front of them. Doesn't mean go wash the person's car, but it does mean within the general scope of what you're doing, I'm not really that worried about a couple of hours here and there. I want you to focus on what they need and help them get it done. It will come back to us later, and so not sort of the inherent faith I have in that and karma, that if you put the good out there, it will come back. We do believe in that. Part of what I learned in the military is, moral courage. Do the right thing when nobody's looking. That's a really hard thing to do. I teach my kids this. I teach, do the right thing when it won't matter to anybody else, right? But you'll know. And so that's one of the keys in the Marine Corps. You're operating on a hairline. I mean, things can go bad quickly, right? And people's lives could be at stake. If you think about did they do the right thing when no one was looking? Did they tighten that bolt on that, personnel carrier? Did they, load up enough clips when they were going into, that next combat situation? Did they get lazy and not do enough, right? You'd hope that they would just all do the right thing constantly so you can count on it. So that's one of the biggest keys I'd say that we really focus on is do the right thing when no one's looking, go above and beyond when nobody asks you to. Those are things in the military we did a lot, and just sort of come about, and in this company at Layer 8, we try to espouse that as much as possible. The way we eventually did wrap around some words around it, because after we didn't do it for about 5 years in business, I just was observing and writing and collecting some thoughts. And suddenly I realized, there's a couple of ways that we actually do operate, as a company. And I thought when we had a lot of new employees, during COVID, we really grew a lot. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone was operating on the same sheet of music. So we have them everywhere. They're also on like mouse pads and things. But I'll just tell you, we talk about integrity always. So, give the client the bad news, give your teammates the bad news when it's required. Always do the right thing, operate with integrity. Drive it forward means get it done. That's that, go above and beyond. Get it done. Don't sit around and just hope, oh, I'm sure somebody else will. No, if you know it can be done and you can do it, go do it. Get it done. Innovate. I'm never one of those leaders who says, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is how we'll keep doing it. I've never been like that. I'm like, if it's working, great. But if there's a better way to do it, and a more efficient way to do it, let's do it. Let's explore it. I mean, new ideas are what bring energy and youthfulness to an organization. No matter how old or young the people are, if you're just set and stayed in your ways, that's no fun. So, which brings me to the last one, which is have fun. So we have those 4 values: integrity, always drive it forward, innovate, and then have fun. And we try to do that, all those things all the time, if you will. It drives a lot of behavior. So we definitely feel strongly that, we did finally wrap some words around it so that we could create a better unified culture around it.
Now, I met you at the seminar that I guess it was a hybrid event because it was online and it was in person.
Mhm.
And you had some outstanding speakers there. And the whole purpose was helping folks to understand how to get certified for the CMMC 2.0. Can you explain to our audience what is CMMC
Yeah.
2.0?
When through the course of our history as a country, whenever our country is at war or preparing for it, there's a lot of synergy with the private sector, right? The private sector creates the tanks, the bullets, the guns, all the things, right? It creates the personnel carriers, the planes, the radar. You need the civilian companies to create these things in order to support the defense and the Department of Defense. And that group that supports it is called the Defense Industrial Base, or the DIB. And the Defense Industrial Base is a key aspect to making our country more secure, to preparing our war fighters for the fight ahead of them. And when we don't protect the information about the products that we're creating for that warfighter, we're putting them at risk. And so CMMC, it stands for the Cyber Maturity Model Certification. It's actually been in the works for a long time. It took a couple of watershed moments, one of which was the SolarWinds breach that happened about 5 years ago. That was a huge watershed moment because it was a huge infiltration into several Department of Defense and federal government computer systems that was allowed by a third party, SolarWinds. So what CMMC boils down to is that synergy and energy that the private sector uses to propel our warfighters forward. You have to protect that ecosystem, and CMMC is entirely about protecting that ecosystem.
Mhm.
1.0 was just the first version of CMMC. What was written into law about 6 months ago was 2.0. And it was a simplified version of it, which, the first one had like 5 levels and different gradations. This one's 3 levels, a little simpler in its structure. And really there's auditors that sort of run the testing, if you will. Then
Right.
there's readiness practitioners that get companies ready to get a CMMC audit and help them self-certify. So layer 8 is a readiness practitioner. So that's what we really focus on. We like to create long-term partnerships and help them create and maintain a program. We bring in auditors in order to certify them and test out. So where it's going to happen now is there are about 80,000 plus companies, 80,000 that need to get these certifications because that's how big just the first wave of the defense industrial base is. This easily reaches and sort of spider webs into if you are a managed service provider just doing an IT service, but you work for a company that has to get a CMMC certification, you might need to get a CMMC certification because you're handling their data. CMMC is all about the sensitive information called controlled unclassified information, CUI. It's
Hmm.
not classified. If you're on the classified side, there's a whole nother world you have to live within. This is just for people who deal with unclassified. It's not even the classified part.
Oh, wow.
So this is how it's going to go. It tendrils out into these other third parties. You might be a data center, and if all of your data that you're hosting works with a lot of the defense contractors, not just Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Boeing and all them, but there are hundreds and thousands of small organizations, and we have many of them as clients even that they might just make one piece of an electrical conduit box that goes into a tank, goes into a plane, goes into a
Right.
personnel carrier that alone is considered CUI. That company now needs to master this certification in order to stay in business. So it really is keeping businesses in business, as I said, our mission. It really is key. It's a huge bear for these companies to tackle. Again, like I said, that empathy, they didn't get into this job to be the most cybersecure at it.
Right.
They know how to make this thing and they know how to sell it and manage it for their clients who are federal government clients. Well, they don't cybersecurity. We have an IT guy. I don't know what do we do? Like, no, it's a
Right.
whole company thing. And so the summit was really helping to understand amongst the community here, why do you need it? What does it mean? How do you do it? How do you maintain it? How will it evolve over the years? And so that was the information we brought to the area companies.
That was an awesome learning experience for myself. I have my brother's friend. He's involved in cybersecurity or just got involved, and I mentioned this to him. He goes, "Oh, I didn't know about that." I said, "Oh, you should know about CMMC too." So
Yeah, yeah.
wonderful. And so you use the word empathy. Um, as you know, Daniel Goldman is a famous psychologist who writes about that. How have you been able to leverage empathy, but not lose, I guess, not control, but I guess the momentum that you want when you're managing new members of your team? And is there a training program that when someone comes on board, a protocol that you put them through?
Yeah, so, empathy is important as a leader. I think it's one of those crucial aspects that gets lost. Empathy doesn't mean um, it doesn't mean you're being soft on people. It means you're trying to. What I care about is the end state. What I don't necessarily want to care too much about is the process, right? But if I give somebody, here's the outcome I need you to produce, all right? I don't want to have to micromanage them. I don't want to have to figure out their ones and zeros and all that. I just want them to produce the outcome. But you do have to give them some sense of direction if they need it, depending on the level of, professional you're working with. So there are times when if you've got to guide or teach a person or an organization, you have to meet them where they're at. If they don't feel heard, they can't listen to you, right? They don't understand us. He doesn't get how I work. He doesn't understand the tools I use. If that's the case, then they're not going to produce the outcome. And if at the end of the day, what you care about is the outcome, then that's the kind of thing you have to you do need to focus on it. I don't know. I wouldn't say I lead with empathy, but I always have it there that like, okay, is this person going through something? Is it something I've been through? Can I relate to them? Do I have something to offer them? Do I know somebody else who has something to offer them to help them move along, progress forward? So I look at empathy as a good, strong tool in a tool chest. It's not the whole thing. But it's a significant portion of it because I do feel like it keeps the humanity in what we do. It's not just about, the bottom line. In the Marine Corps, we say, mission accomplishment is number one, welfare of your people is number two priority. Some people want to say welfare of your personnel is number one. Well, the hard part about that is if you don't get the mission done right, then why were you even doing it, right? Sometimes the mission might require someone sacrificing their bodily injury or their life. We don't want to be in that position, but sometimes that's the mission on an extreme side. Now, in a business setting, we have to care about the outcome. If somebody's not up to the task, if they're unable to do it, or if they are, but they needed a little bit of coaching and guidance, that's where that empathy kicks in. And we can, all right, what do you need? What's going on? You got a family issue? Let's focus on that. Let's help you get that squared away so that we can get you back into the fight here. We want you to be effective. So, and people want to be held. They want to be told, yeah, I got you, right? I got your back. And that, again, that empathy helps to, I think, relay that message.
It's very interesting with what you just shared with us, and it brings up the thought of someone having the will to do the job, to do the mission, or someone having the skill to do it. And sometimes it's a combination of both. Have you found yourself looking through it through that particular lens in regards to someone not performing as well as you think that they should? And how do you address that if it's a will issue or a skill?
You know, so at home years ago we got a Peloton, one of those bikes with the
Yeah.
screen on and the instructor is talking you through it. And I do these live rides, and in the moment I'm doing the ride, I'm in the middle of, you're going up the mountain and you're really cranking the resistance on. And they're like, all right, straighten your back out, straighten those wrists, really tighten that cord. And I'm like, man, how do they know the exact moment I needed that, right? It's because they needed it. It's because they observed for themselves what they needed and then they shared it because they're leading a group of people to accomplish an objective. And I kind of view it the same way. Like sometimes I even might feel that way. I'm like, oh, I don't like, why do I feel so slow to operate right now? Like, what's the last couple of days? I've just been very like, I just want to sit at my desk and knock things out. I don't want to be outside. Like, what's that about? Right. And so I get curious for myself. And then I also get curious for other people. I try to think about, if a teammate isn't up to a task, is it something I might be doing? Did I create a scenario where they might feel demotivated? I try to look at their surroundings, what about them, where they're at, who they're working with, is something around that not working, so I try to be I look at it holistically and not just that person's a problem, right? People don't want to fail. It's not an innate thing that people want to fail. People actually want to succeed. Biologically, we're engineered to try to achieve more. We even get endorphins from, doing the good things, right? So biologically, we want to be moving forward, but if somebody's not, there must be a reason, and you just got to start asking some questions, and sometimes I'm not the person to ask, right? I'm the president of the company. That people might not always want to open up to me. My door is always open, but you have to know some people will gel better with others, and so we have a couple of really good what we call office empaths, and part of the HR, and hey, why don't you get so and so to talk to so and so? Let's see if we can help them, move through whatever has got their legs stuck in the mud. And we try to push it through that way. And so it's not just about is there an issue? It's always who's going to be the best person to like suss that out. So we try to hit it from all angles.
Very nice. And we're coming to the close of the interview, and I want to get a couple more questions. And this has been awesome. What kind of leadership does it take to stay ahead of the constantly shifting threats that we have? I mean, I was watching CNBC this morning. They got this gentleman from Axios talking about AI and how it's going to displace people.
Mhm.
How do you manage that as a leader?
Well, so the two things, being a leader and being a leader in the cybersecurity industry are both, that it actually can be tough. We have to, as the people operating the company, we have to be comfortable with the set of services. Sometimes they might get stale. You have to be willing to say, yeah, we've been doing that, and it's a nice, profitable thing that we do. But a year or two from now, there's probably not a place for that. We have to be willing to sunset something to say that doesn't work for us. So we had an example. We were doing high trust audit for a while. We did the readiness and we did the audit. And I won't get too far down the path into high trust. But it's an information security certification program. And as the auditor, you're like stamping approval or denial on top of somebody and they'll go away. You also have auditors who that's how they operate. They're a very specific type of person. They're not going to be your day on, stay on type of consultant. So after a while, we decided that part of the business isn't as interesting for us. It doesn't provide the longevity of revenue. And, with the rapid changes that they make with these audits, the team doesn't really enjoy it. And we only have a couple people, and they're not switch hitters. They can't go from being this type of consultant to that. So we decided over the course of a year, we'll sunset this practice. We're going to move that out. We helped the auditors who weren't quite switch hitters. We celebrated them, supported them, and helped them move on to the next gig. We made introductions. We had a lot of partners, and we wanted the best for them, but we didn't want to do this thing anymore. So we had to be willing to say, yeah, we invested money and time in it. We did it for 5 years. It gave us a lot of longevity in the business, but we just don't want to do it anymore. So we made that call based off of what we thought was best for our people, then the types of clients we really want. And it paid off. We're happy we did it.
Wow. I mean, you have explained this in such a great way about stopping an activity that is no longer profitable or no longer necessary, but people are emotionally tied to it, sunsetting. I love that.
Yeah.
Last but not least, how do you personally stay grounded and inspired as a leader?
Well, my I've been around good leaders. I've also been around bad leaders. And they say whoever they are, but you learn as much from the bad teachers as you do from the good ones.
That's right.
Um, there are ones that came way before. I'm a big reader about George Washington, Robert E. Lee, Lincoln. Leaders who had good and bad all around them, and I like to read about business leaders. I read about the early days of Steve Jobs. I read about the early days of Jack Welch, and how he got going at GE, and I like to see and hear what people have going on. I think there's a lot to learn. People innately are not all that different from one another. We all kind of want the same thing. So when I'm trying to think for myself, how would I like to be led? Almost golden rule, right? How do I want to be led? Would that make me effective? If it demotivates me, I have to assume it'll demotivate somebody, And so I try to look at it how I would apply it to myself because that's what I've read and seen what others did. Lincoln had this saying, he used to be a paradox to your people. And he was very steady and consistent. And once in a while, he would almost time it. He'd like, I need to blow up on, and he'd come in the telegram office barking away at people for not getting it. And once in a while he would do that because he knew he needed to kind of keep people on their toes. So there's a couple things like that. Washington had an ism, if you will. He said there's you don't need to make a decision until there's a decision to be made. And some people are in such a rush and want to compulsively just hurry up and go. And there may not even have been a reason to do anything. Like I'm not an indecisive person, but I also don't make decisions just for the sake of doing it, right? Like, there's plenty of judgments you have to make in your life, right? Um, and one of the things that I feel really helped me as well is studying decision making, studying good judgment has been something that I learned through my master's at Seton Hall, actually.
Mhm.
Um, there was a lot of times when we realized there was going to be, when do you need to make a judgment? What criteria will you use? So like even when we are selling our services, like really bigger, projects, I will write a cover letter sometimes to the decision maker at the client. Here's the value system we use, thinking this would be the most what you care about when we're delivering this outcome for you. And they really like that because it grounds them in I understand where they're going. I understand what they're doing. So we're leading them in their decision-making process. So
Yes.
I try to keep it all over the place. And I'll tell you the last thing that really grounds me is my family. I've spoken in front of 1,000 people. I've been given awards, and yet you're gonna walk home. Guess what you're gonna do? You're gonna load the dishwasher. You can take out the trash. You're gonna pick up the dogs. Number two. I mean, you're still, no one's too big for their britches. My kids will instantly, say a thing that, you're like, oh man, so I look to my family pretty easily as, no place I want to be more than just around them. And so, I feel like if I'm doing a thing that they're proud of, that they would be proud of me for, that's probably the right thing to be doing, whether it's hard or easy.
Beautiful, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Mr. Kevin Hyde. He's the president and co-founder of Layer 8 Security. Kevin, thank you for coming on the program today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity just to talk with you more.
I enjoyed it so much. That wraps it up today on Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter. We want you to have a great day, but remember, leadership, it begins with you.